Up YouTube. So I wasn't able to do my live video. I try to do a live video every week, either on a Saturday or a Sunday. It was extremely windy in Oklahoma, and whenever I'm in here, I've done a few videos when it's kind of windy and the roof is shaking, so the video quality isn't the best. So I'm very sorry about that. I do have plans to up my video equipment. I'm just doing everything off my phone. Um, I would like to, have a better situation for, recording videos. But outside of that, it's been a pretty good week. Somebody reached out to me I'd say like 5 or so days ago, and they came into Edmond to sell a log to somebody. And whenever they came into Edmond to sell the log to somebody, I actually know this individual, and I don't want to mention his name, but not the best reputation and whatnot. So they drove a few hours away to sell him a walnut log, and he completely ghosted them. So they put a log in the back of their truck. I didn't know it was in the back of the truck. I assumed it was going to be in a trailer. I was hoping it was going to be in a trailer that was above the axles, so you could just roll the log off. But whenever they showed up, it was in the back of their truck. So this guy called me 3 different times. Great guy. I'm really glad that I have the connection. He's putting me on a bunch of walnut trees. So there's a pretty fantastic situation because I manage, probably over 10,000 acres in my state. So I kind of, look at the different trees that are on the properties and, walnut trees, and you can kind of tell which trees need to be cut, and that's going to be, there's degrading, branches, there's dying tops. You can tell that, certain things, there's bugs in it, certain things that go on with these walnut trees, and that's what makes me want to cut them. So you have to, cut the certain trees, selective harvest. I come in and cut, 25, 30, and 35, and 40-inch, 50-inch walnut trees, and 12, 13, 14, 15-inch trees that are walnut around those other trees. You kind of want to make sure that you're not going to do damage to them. So sometimes there's big old trees, like we gotta climb the tree and we have to dismantle it. So they'll take all day long just to dismantle, let's say, a big old tree. Let's say a big old walnut tree, and there's a bunch of beautiful trees around it. It's like desire. I can just cut the tree down and not really have to worry about it landing on 3 or 4 different 12-inch wide walnut trees. And let's say this big old walnut tree that I'm following clips these other walnut trees, and that actually can be it'll change the trajectory of those trees, because whenever ice storms come in, I've been cutting trees for 15 years. I've been working for myself for around 15 years. I haven't worked for somebody in 15 years, so I consider myself an entrepreneur. I've had many different businesses, lots of failures. Whenever you're in business, my first business, car wash, and auto detailing and stuff like that. When I was 16, 17 years old, and it kind of went to landscaping, different properties and stuff. Like you do these different rocks, and you put this, dirt in, and you do anything that they want to do on the outside of the house. And then it goes to you're starting to repair soffits, and you're painting exteriors of the house. Let's say you have a 3,000 square foot house. I charge you $4,000. I come in with my spray rig, and I paint your house. And then it comes into remodeling houses, bathroom remodels, tile, and all those different things. I just love remodeling houses, and that's just kind of what I started doing, many years ago. And then I found wood a decade ago. So a decade ago, we used to have land. My dad passed away last year. It was crazy, but anyways, we used to have land, and I harvested trees off this land. And I cut these cedar trees down and took them to a sawmill. And sawmill in Oklahoma City no longer in business. So I took these logs. It was kind of difficult to get a log onto a trailer without equipment. So kind of figuring that situation out, getting it to a sawmill, and just seeing the process of these logs being cut into slabs, and you see this beautiful wide piece of wood that's kind of just more unique than a regular 2x6 from Lowe's or Home Depot. Kind of fascinated me. So a decade ago is like when like I started like falling in love with like just like woodworking and like cutting wood. I started woodworking, I would say, in high school. I'm 34 years old, so whenever that was, I did all the different wood techs they had available up until senior year, and it was just a great situation. And like I love cutting wood, but like it's kind of a ramble. But 10 years ago, I found taking logs to a sawmill and doing that hundreds of different times. I probably incurred $20,000 or $30,000 in sawmill fees in a 4-year period. And 17 or 18, 17, I decided to really consider buying my own sawmill. So I purchased my first sawmill, and it was a Wood-Mizer, kind of like this. Had a gasoline engine. Did pretty much everything this machine can do. This machine is obviously better than that old machine that I had. I sold that machine in 2020 and people were freaking out. People were like restricted. People, I've never been restricted in my life, so like I don't really like understand like not being able to like do what I'm typically doing. That's like being in the woods, cutting trees. Currently, at one point in time, at 17, I had to completely decide if I'm going to sell wood on the side or if I'm going to continue to remodel houses, kind of full time and sell wood on the side. I completely abandoned my business, and that's when I went full on wood. This is all I do. I cut wood, I sell wood. I would love to come to your property. If you're in the state of Oklahoma, I'll bring my machine out to your property. It's going to cost you $150 an hour. There's going to be a setup fee. It's going to be based off your location, and I'll cut your logs. I've cut for over 234 people in the state of Oklahoma. I have one scheduled. It's going to be 235 people. So I've cut for 235 people in the state of Oklahoma. And I will say, I have hundreds of references. If you need a reference, people, who's this guy that I'm going to bring on your property? I have dozens. I literally could reach out to 100 different people, and you could have the reference to know that like I bring quality to the table. So the most amount of logs I've cut in a day, which isn't like super crazy if you think about like other sawmill operations. If you're on like the West Coast or the East Coast, like I'm a really small business. I do everything myself. I've cut 65 logs in a day. That also consisted of the landowners on a tractor. He had his wife out there. I also had, a guy working for me, Clayton, and we knocked out 65 logs in a day. I've done 40 in a day, I've done 50 in a day, 20, 10, 15. It all depends on the situation. Every sawmill setup is going to be different. I didn't put my phone on Do Not Disturb, so I hope no one calls me. I believe my wife is sleeping right now. So that's that. So yeah, I love what I do. The wood business and like the sawmill and cutting wood just completely took over my life. And once I sold my first sawmill in 2020, bought this machine, 6 weeks wait time. And then during that time, after 2020, I think 2020 to 2002, there was like a long period of time where there was like a year wait time on these machines. Like there was like times where like people would reach out to me and they would like tell me that they would pay for my machine like well above like what you could purchase this machine for, just so they could get the machine. Like I had no desire to sell it. If somebody wanted to give me $60,000 for this machine right now, that's what it would cost to replace. This machine was built before COVID. I hear a lot of people that have Wood-Mizers since 2020 have had issues with many different things as far as the machine goes. I think Wood-Mizer is a great product. I will say this machine was built before COVID. Great machine. I have no desire to sell it. But if you want to give me $60,000, I would buy a new machine, and you can have this machine for $60,000. If you don't want to pay for the machine, I'm not trying to sell it. I'm just saying I would sell it for $60,000. It would cost $60,000 to replace it. If you wanted to buy this machine for $60,000, I'll sell it. I'd buy a new one. I actually would probably be if I was to sell this for $60,000, I would probably order LT70 wide within the week. So it would probably be like a 6 to 8 to maybe 3 to 4 month time frame where I would be without a sawmill. It'd give me the ability to do other things. So I'm not really planning on selling a sawmill, but if you wanted to buy it for 60,000, I would love to sell it to you. I do have plans to buy at least 70, and that's just because I just love the sawmill. Like, I want to have joystick controls, and I'm gonna have a sawmill situation. One day I'm gonna have a complimentary skid steer. So like, I want to like own a skid steer. I don't want to like have to rely on my buddy that's a skid steer. Like, I want to have a skid steer that can manage logs, and you know, I could like kind of like change this micro sawmill business into like a larger thing. And like, until then, I just gotta have to work with what I have, and that's a 12 by 40 storage unit. I can store this in this particular location. I have GPS on this machine, so I know where it's at all times. But yeah, anyway, so like I store this in this location, I take it out and cut logs, and I bring it back in this location. This location is not set up to cut logs. Unfortunately, there's a lot of people that reach out to me. They want to bring me logs, and they want me to cut them. Well, that would consist of me setting up at my house. Sometimes the log will fill up almost an entire blue trash can filled with sawdust and offcuts, so I don't really like have the ability to like cut logs for people. I've never had customers bring logs to my house. The only logs that I will cut at my house are gonna be like my own logs. So to get back at the beginning of the story, and I know I'm rambling, but so somebody, you know, reached out to me like 3 or 4 different times, like throughout the day, and like they were just like ghosted by this individual, and I ended up paying $80 for this, you know, big walnut log. They bought it in a truck. I was a little confused that it was in the back of their pickup, because I was ready to, you know, roll it off a trailer and certain things. I had cant hooks, had rollers ready to go. They showed up at the truck. I backed my F350 up, hooked chains to it, pulled it off into the street. I rolled the log into my yard. It stayed in my yard for 2 days. I just recently posted a short video of the log, so you see the different grains. It's a beautiful log. As you can see, this log cut is walnut. I've sold over 10,000 slabs in the past decade. That's pretty easy to do because I sell well over 1,000 slabs every year. So I don't know the exact number of slabs, but I've moved many slabs, and a lot of my wood, you know, moves in Texas. So anyway, so yeah, he just kept on calling me. I wasn't set up to like, you know, take a log. This is a Saturday. I'm with my family, with my kids. And I was like, yeah, if you want to bring it to my house, I'll give you $80 for it. And like, I was just like looking in my pocket, and like I had like $420, so it's like I'm not really trying to like pull money out of, you know, wherever I have to pull it out of, you know, to get more money to pay this guy that's like really needing me to sell this log. And I bought it for $80. I sliced it up, and you know, it'll go in a stack, and you know, in a few years I'll sell it. So like, I typically don't ever have anybody just like literally bring me a beautiful walnut log, at those particular prices. It was kind of a God thing. So I'm really thankful for the individual. I'm very thankful that like he saw that like, he kind of got screwed over by the individual. He reached out to me and was like, hey, yeah, if you want to bring it to me, I'll give you $80 for it. He was like, well, that's cool. You know, the guy was only going to pay me X amount of dollars, so you know, at least I can, you know, get $80 for this log. I bought it for $80. I was stoked about it. I have, you know, 500 or 600 slabs just in the stacks at my house and stuff. So adding another log to inventory was really great. But I have to go into the woods. So 661C primary saw right here. This is a saw that like just loves to eat wood. I have another one. It's just like it. I don't ever bust this one out unless like it's like super cold. Like if this one like was like, let's say, dull, and something was wrong with it, and it needed like maintenance, like a 10 or 15 minute situation, it was super cold, I would go ahead and bust this thing out. But this one doesn't get busted out unless this one's like, you know, in a cold situation. I don't want to like, you know, sharpen it or, you know, put a new chain on it or whatever I need to do. I have new sprockets for all my chainsaws, new parts for my sawmill, so you know, things break. Like this sawmill, there's times when the sawmill breaks. How are you gonna fix the sawmill? You're gonna take it to Woodminster in Missouri to get it fixed. Well, you know, that's I think a 3.5, 4 hour drive. Not happening. So like, you need to figure out like, how are you going to know how to align your machine? You need to learn how to like align your machine and figure out like what's going on with the blade. If you're gonna use like 10 degree, 7 degree, 4 degree, like You know, are you going to use 1.5 blades, 1.25 blades? You know, what thickness blades? You need to make sure if you pinpoint your thickness of blades. Let's make sure this video is still going. I'm like talking to myself. But yeah, you need to make sure when you get a sawmill, you're pinpointing your thickness of blade, you need to make sure that setting is in your set works because it will adjust for your curve. So whenever I have a log on this sawmill, I just tap my thing down. If I'm cutting 5/4 material, I can cut 5/4 material, all day long. 2-inch material, 6/4, 8/4, 10/4, 12/4, whatever quarter you want to, cut the log. I'll cut it all day long, consistent cuts. And that set works is very important that you have it, set up properly so it adjusts for the curve. So if you're running, 0.055, thickness blades, make sure that's, adjusted in there so you can like have proper, quality cuts, consistent cuts every single time. There's right now, the only issue that I have with this sawmill, simple fix. So my water valve to my water tank, it's full flow. The inside of it's, had major problems, multiple times, and I just literally like bored it out. Like it's just straight water flow. You can't adjust it. So I'm gonna cut the line. I'm gonna put a new thing in there so I can regulate the drip on the system. I'm throwing too much water on my log, and this just recently happened. I'm throwing too much water on my log whenever I'm cutting it. And I'm throwing too much wet sawdust in this compartment, and ideally you have a perfect ratio. Like if I could turn down my water during that log that I just cut in my house, I wouldn't have that issue. But I couldn't. Like I was trying to kink this hose, just because if you have too much water thrown on your log whenever you're cutting, you're gonna gunk this up, and you're gonna have to clean it out. Ideally, it's more of a drier sawdust and it's flowing through there, and that doesn't get gunked up, and you can cut 15 logs before you have to you can open that cover up, assuming you don't hit metal or a piece of bark doesn't come in there and throw off your blade, or whatever happens. If you're going to cut pine with the sawmill, I always use a diesel drip. So anytime I use a diesel drip, I have to walk to the front of my unit. My lights go off every 15 minutes. I'm very thankful that it's not loud in here, and I hope you guys can hear my voice. But sometimes it gets really rattly and you can't hear my voice. I will get something that I can wear where I can actually have a clearer video. But I have to walk up here to turn this light on because that's just what happens. It goes off every 15 minutes. Didn't do my live video on Saturday or Sunday, so I was like, man, I really gotta do what I said I'm gonna do. It was extremely windy. I was extremely busy. My wife just started a new business up. She has this ice cream cart, so push pops and ice cream sandwiches and stuff. So if I had to take her to these events, I take her to these events and she sells out. She has 300 goods in this this cart that we ordered and kind of customized and did many things with. And I take her to these events and she sells out. So it's pretty cool to see her grow her business. Because I just love business. I love somebody that's willing to take the initiative and not rely on somebody paying your bills. Let's say you have a job, it's going to require you to work 40 hours a week. Well, they're going to promise you X amount of dollars for your 40 hours a week. So those 40 hours are taken from you for the promise of that dollar. I always, for the past 15 years, I've always thought of ways in that 40 hours, how can I come up with ways to generate my own money so I don't have to rely on somebody, have to take my freedoms away. Because when you work for somebody, you don't necessarily have the freedoms that I have. I can do whatever I want any single day I want. Outside of my wife telling me what I need to do. If you have to, work, a Monday through Friday job, 9 to 5, I feel like that's extremely stressful. I used to do heating and air for 5 years. I loved it, but as far as working for somebody, it just doesn't work out for me because there's so much opportunity in this world. There's so much opportunity around you. if you have the desire to open a business, I highly encourage you that you open that business, because like if you have a relationship potentially with like Jesus, and like you have you're religious and stuff like that, like all things are possible through Christ. So like people are just like always like they have this guaranteed income, and like like they work for work for the man, and they're getting their mortgage is getting paid for. They work for the man. They really want to like do the thing that they've always loved to do, but they just haven't been able to figure out like how to take that leap of faith. And I would just like highly encourage you, like if you desire and love something, figure out a way to make it like your job. Like whenever I like take this sawmill out, I don't like consider it work. Like I love what I do. So like I've always like to figure out a way like how can I like love what I do during the day with whatever that consists of, and like make a living at it. So like that's just kind of like how I'm wired. My favorite thing to do outside of like hang out with kids and go on vacation, which is like rarely happens, and, hang out with the wife, is gonna be like taking my wood miser out into the woods with a cooler filled of refreshments and a cooler filled with meat and everything that you need to accomplish, the goals that you have. Let's say you're gonna cut a few trees down, stay in the woods for a few days or a night, cut trees, slice trees up, bring a bunch of slabs home. That's my absolute favorite thing to do. So if you want to put me on more trees, let's say, I would love to come on your property, and the best opportunity you can get is going to be $150 an hour. You keep all your wood. You're going to pay me $150 an hour to cut your wood. But if you have land in Oklahoma and you have lots of timber, you bring me onto your property. We'll harvest these trees properly. We'll put them on the ground. We'll put the proper trees on the ground. We'll slice them up. Assuming you're going to be doing workloads, you'll get 50% of the material. I'll get 50% of the material. You're not going to pay me $1, and I'm not going to pay you $1. That situation has happened over 100 times in the state of Oklahoma. People have trees, valuable trees. They don't have the means or the chainsaws or the capacity to cut these trees down or turn them into, slabs. And, that's kind of my specialty, is taking a tree and turning it into slabs, and, I turn it into dollar bills. So there's been dozens of times where people they have these burn piles, which is unfortunate. Ideally, you wouldn't have, handled those logs with that big equipment during that time and pushed them in those piles. We would have, been a little bit, more nurturing to the logs. Let's say cut them down properly and put them in stacks. But there's times where people, push a bunch of logs into burn piles, and sometimes those logs will have cracks and whatever happens to those logs. But you want to salvage them, because let's say you have a 30-inch wide walnut tree, and let's say this guy just bought 100 acres and he's clearing it, and these burn piles are just gonna they're gonna pour diesel on them. They're just gonna go up in smoke. So you chain up some of the piles, and then after you chain up those piles, you're gonna drag some additional limbs out. So you can't just leave those additional limbs out on this big old pile. You're gonna have to make sure you put those limbs back in the pile. If you don't have a machine to do it, you're gonna have to cut it up with a chainsaw. Make sure you put your piles back. If they're extremely nice, which happens many times, they'll just grab their equipment that they have on their land, and they'll just pluck the logs out for you. But ideally, before you cut the tree down, you bring me to your property, and we kind of have a plan. So every property is going to have a plan. So I'm going to need to get an idea of the scope of work. As you know, the most amount of logs I can cut in a day is going to be 65. So depending upon the scope of work, I need a plan to make sure I can accomplish those goals. Because anytime I go out with this sawmill, I'm fully prepared to stay the night and accomplish my goals. You don't know what's going to happen with this sawmill. You don't know what's going to happen with the weather. There's been 3 different times this sawmill, I've had to have a welder do things on this sawmill just to, situate the broken, the part. And whenever you do weld on this machine, I didn't learn from like experience by doing it wrong, but anytime you weld on this machine, you need to make sure you unplug the battery, all cables off of your battery to your electronics, because you wouldn't want to fry any electronic components because you're welding on this machine. I'm not the best welder. I can weld, but every time this machine has been welded, it's by like a professional welder, and I'm gladly willing to pay them. I pay them in cash, and it takes them like no time to do. So I actually have like 3 or 4 different welders that I could go to at any time, and they could weld anything I needed up on this particular machine. So I'm very thankful for that. So anytime you get a wood miser, if you do plan on getting a wood miser, make sure you have a plan. It's always important to kind of plan, like if you desire to get a wood miser, like what's your plan to get logs? What's your plan to take that log and get it to your sawmill? Where's your sawmill going to stay? Do you have the cash to actually purchase a sawmill, or do you have to finance a sawmill? If you desire and have to finance a sawmill, then you might have some unnecessary pressures on your shoulders on a monthly basis to produce, and there might be a few months that might be tight. So if you don't have that cash flow, or the cash to purchase the machine in full, I like to just purchase the machine in full, pay for the machine. I wouldn't even like think of like financing a sawmill. This is my wood miser. I have another sawmill, the Lucas mill, 76 inches wide by 20 feet. It cuts like my big wood, so it's used once or twice a year max. The reason I purchased it is because I used to pay someone $1,000 to $1,500 to cut my big wood, and after you do that, quite a few times, you're like, well, why don't you just go buy a $14,000 Lucas mill? So that's kind of what I did. I did that also in 2020. So yeah, I have two different sawmills. I love what I do. I love cutting wood. If you have any questions, put them in the comments. I would love to answer some questions. Like I look through. I've only said this maybe like once or twice, but I say put your comments in the questions. I'll answer them in the next video. So that's kind of a little bit about my business. It's a little ramble. There's no structure to it. It was pretty cool pulling that log off of that truck. Like, it was kind of in the spur of the moment. I wish I got it on video, but my kids were outside. There's actually quite a few kids outside. This guy pulls up with this big walnut log. I literally went into work mode. I just figured, he was there for 3 minutes. Like, probably 5 minutes, he was gone. So, yeah, I just, pulled the log off and rolled it up into my yard. And 2 days later, I sliced up my sawmill. Beautiful log. Nothing to brag about, and I don't ever mean to come off as like boasting or bragging. This is just kind of like honest, like talk type deal. But yeah, wood miser, it's extremely like rewarding machine. Lots of work that goes involved with the wood miser. I love it. I will say I probably spend more time with the wood miser than like face to face with my wife or like my kids. So I would say like you need to figure out like a balance. There was a time where that was like 10x. Like I wasn't spending any time with the family. Like all I was doing was I was literally cutting logs every single day, like for 2 or 3 years straight with the wood miser, and like I would like acquire and procure every species. So whenever I acquire and procure every species, a log is on your schedule every single day. You can get a free log every single day, and it's a lot of work. So you go out to these locations. I've set up 500 plus different. I've more than that. I have 1,000 plus hours in all my machines and stuff. But anyway, so like 100 different locations. You get whitewood, sycamore, oak, pin oak, all different types of logs. Any tree, black locust, all different tree of heaven. All these different beautiful black cherry. Lots of walnut, sycamore. Sycamore is my absolute favorite tree, like log. It's my favorite log, assuming the log was like on the ground for 6 months and then it was rolled over and sat on the ground for another 6 months, and that spalting was in the log. Just plain sycamore, it's cool, but I desire sycamore to sit on the ground for like a year before I cut it. We have dozens, me and my buddy have dozens of sycamore logs we have to cut. I cannot wait to cut that material. There's hundreds of logs that, I kind of, possess just chilling at different locations, and, just kind of have to cut them. But that wood, white wood, I think it's more desired whenever it's stored properly, higher ground, not rotting away, and you can allow the bugs and certain funguses to create, spalting and certain things in the wood, and it gives effects on the white wood that are just absolutely beautiful. I love spalted sycamore. That's one of my favorite grains of wood. I have a few pieces at my house, just kind of personal pieces. I guess since we're talking about pieces, let's see. Oh. This is like a pecan burl, I cut that like 9 years ago. Just a beautiful piece of wood. Again, somebody reached out to me, and I gave them money, and they brought the burl to me. And that's kind of typically how it goes. If I acquire logs, because I'm typically going out and acquiring the logs myself, I don't typically have middlemen. You have the log, it's already in log form, and you're trying to bring it to me. It's like, well, I wanted the tree, I wanted to cut the tree down, or I wanted to salvage the log and do it myself, and now I have to I would love for you to bring it to me. I'll pay you this, and that's what they do. I cut this tree down. I fell it on 23rd Street. Beautiful, beautiful cut. It was a nuisance for the landowner. Red elm, so it's not shined out. There's no like oils or anything like on it. One of my favorite cuts is gonna be that. It's not really for sale. If somebody wanted to give me like $1,000 for it, I would sell it. But I'm not really trying to sell it or market it. It's never been marketed, or I'm not trying to sell it. But if you're like, I'll give you $1,000 for it, okay, well, take it. But yeah, man, I absolutely love wood. I still have plans to create something in here that can kind of showcase. I have hundreds of different burls, and resin casting, pin blanks, knife blanks. I have hundreds of knife blanks, and sets, book match sets. You open them up and fire grain on both sides that resemble each other. So I have quite the collection of wood. Unfortunately, it's all stored in containers. And it's at my house, and it's not displayed. So you can't necessarily sell something if you can't necessarily show it to the person that potentially might want to buy it. I get people in here quite often that make knives, and they make pins, and they buy larger chunks of pieces, and they break them down. But if I was able to show them all these different fire grains that I have, all these different burls and these smaller pieces of burls that people could use. I really want to see that here very soon. But yeah, so this wall necessarily hasn't changed. There's been a few that have sold right there. My main slabs that have been selling lately are going to be, there's a few on the back wall, and then over here I have some $80 and $100 pieces. They're 4-quarter, 5-quarter. People buy them for charcuteries. I still, I have a few people that have been talking for the past few weeks about these 2 big slabs. I used to have 3 different big slabs right there. I sold them, and I brought the remaining 2 in here. Those were cut in 2020, so whenever I put the moisture meter on them, they're reading 10 and 11 and 12% moisture content. So that's really good, for a 3-inch piece of wood. 100% air dried. There's no bugs in it. All the bark is off this wood. This log didn't sleep on the ground for a day. So whenever I cut a tree down, the logs are sliced up day of or day after. And I typically am going to remove the bark off all logs, because it's just, not before I cut them. After I cut them to slabs, I peel the bark. I like to leave it on site and, kind of leave it in the forest and, certain ravines and stuff like that. So yeah, I love cutting wood. I gotta go out. And so I just got back, a few days ago from, scoping out a few different trees. So I have access to quite a few acres and stuff. So I didn't realize how many box elder trees I have access to. And on these properties that I have access to, I can cut any tree down I want. Now, just morally, you wouldn't want to cut down a shade tree for the cattle. You say you have a beautiful shade tree for these cattle in the middle of the field. Unless it was dying, there's no reason to cut that shade tree down on that property. That's perfectly healthy, doesn't need to be cut down. I could think of over 100 different shade tree walnut trees I would love to cut down, but more it's like, man, it's a healthy tree. That tree is not in decline yet, and those cows sure do love that shade. So selective harvest of certain trees that need to be thinned, and kind of protect the smaller trees in the forest and around those more mature trees whenever you're harvesting them. Try not to damage them. So that's why I like to bring these larger walnut trees to stem. We kind of climb up trees and dismantle all the limbs and stuff, and and then you just have a stem, and then depending upon your surrounding, you can follow that stem, and you can avoid any collateral damage. And that's going to be because you took the extra time to completely dismantle the tree above its stem, and you did that to prevent damage to other trees that you would desire your son to harvest in, let's say, maybe 20 years, if that was the case. I don't want to cut, I could go cut a bunch of 14, 15, 16, 17 inch wide walnut trees down to where I wanted to. They're very easy to cut. They're very easy pickings. They're not deep in the woods, on the outer, tree lines. I could cut them all down and just have trail loads of wood. But unfortunately, a lot of those trees are very healthy, and they don't need to be cut down because one day they will be 30 inches wide, and maybe that's when they need to be thought about cutting down. So managing forests is what I do. I love doing it. I love cutting trees down. I love planting trees. And I love cutting logs for people. That's one of my favorite things to do, is when someone just randomly reaches out to me and they're like, I want you to cut my logs, blah, 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 give me your number, and he says that you cut logs. Like, man, I'd love to cut your logs, tell me about your situation, and they kind of tell me about their scope of work, like, well, I have these 12 trees, these oak trees, they've been dying, I got a tractor with these attachment forks, blah, 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 and they tell you about the situation, like, well, we need to come with a flat spot. Ideally, this flat spot is going to be free of gravel. If there is going to be gravel in this flat spot, then let's get some bunks in there, so we can, get some bunks in there. We can set logs on top of other pieces of wood, so we don't have these logs that are going to continuously roll onto the sawmill. You don't want those logs to get, a bunch of rocks in them. And that's what happens. You'll show up to properties and they got 20 logs and they're all stacked on a bunch of rocks. It's like, well, I'm going to cut them. And I cut them every time. I've cut over 10,000 logs in my life. But whenever you have an entire log deck stacked on gravel, I will tell you 100% of the time, anytime I roll a log on here that has been rolled on gravel, I will spend 5 to 10 minutes plucking gravel out of the bark. So whenever I start eating the wood, I'm not having to change my blade multiple times because I'm eating all your rocks. So I highly recommend, if you do have me come out to your property, flat spot, put some wood down, and then put your logs on top of that wood. So whenever these logs roll up on my sawmill, we're not going to have any rocks that are going to get in them. If you have a water source at location, that is ideal. Let me tell you about my ideal setup, and it's happened dozens of times. It's going to be a flat spot, water on site, skidster or tractor with a landowner that is willing to feed you logs. Like, they know that I cut logs for a living, and their job is to feed this machine logs. So assuming that was the case, landowner's willing to feed me logs, and he's going to be around this machine all day long, because this machine will eat all day long. There's many times where somebody will put a couple of logs on the machine and they'll go do whatever they need to do, and it's like, I'm waiting for more logs, So just feed the machine, flat spot, free of gravel, and a water source at location, because many times whenever there are logs on a log deck, they're going to be dirty, not just rocks, but just dirt, clay. And if you have a hose, I like to wash my logs off before I saw them. That will lengthen the time I'm able to cut with each blade. That will reduce the amount of cost that you potentially are going to pay for blades, and you're going to just get cleaner cuts. Whenever you start dragging, if there's dirt on this side of the log and you start dragging dirt through your cut, that's when you start, heating up this blade, and it gets dull pretty quickly. Behind you, there's over 300 blades that could be sharpened. What's funny is Stay Sharp, a good guy, Joshua Casale. Anyways, he reached out to me. He's like, "Man, I want to buy a sawmill sharpener." He's like, "Tell me about your blades." And I told him everything about my blades. He's saying a sawmill sharpener. I'll probably take 30 or 40 blades to him. He'll sharpen them, because he's literally gonna be an admin, and that's what he does for a living, is sharpen things. So that'll be super cool. But yeah, man, the Wood Miser live video. I try to do once a week. This is my business, very small business. Just, if this is not the channel for you, unsubscribe. If this is, if you have a comment, any questions, let me know. Like, I'll look at the phone and see if there's anything I can see. Sometimes I can't see them. Let's see. Okay. Hello from Gambia. What does this man say? It is too quiet. I wish to understand. Okay. This man likes to talk. Okay. Well, you from Gambia, I'm sorry, but this is just kind of like my small business. I have no monetary, incentive to produce videos on YouTube. You have to start somewhere. I think there's like 1,700 subscribers. I remember like a little over a year ago, I got like 1,000 subscribers, so I'm super cool. But yeah, very small business, and I want to bring more videos live. I was about to go live at my house, but it was extremely windy. So I think having one of those muffled mics to, have a better sound is probably pretty critical. So maybe I can do that in the future. But so I'm looking forward to getting in the woods. I'll get some more videos, put some more shorts out there, and maybe I can get a video that's, about the entire logging process. I have quite a few of them on YouTube, but a new video of a log from start to finish being processed. God bless you guys. Enjoy your day.